Section: Introduction. We're going to talk about the recent progress in the field of text-to-image generation. This technology has made it possible to create detailed images from simple text descriptions. Some models are so good that they can produce results that look like real photos or artworks created by humans. However, these models usually create raster graphics, which are not the best for scientific figures. Why is this a problem? Well, scientific figures are crucial in research. They help researchers communicate complex ideas or present important findings. These figures need to be precise and have clear text, even when the font size is small. Raster graphics often fall short in these areas. That's why many research conferences recommend using vector graphics. These graphics break down information into geometric shapes, allow for searchable text, and usually have smaller file sizes. Automated vector graphics generation is a growing field of research, but it's not without its challenges. Current methods mainly generate low-level path elements of the scalable vector graphics (SVG) format. They either fail to maintain accurate geometric relations, or they only generate outputs of limited complexity, like single icons or font characters. To overcome these challenges, we're exploring the use of graphic languages. These languages provide high-level constructs that can be compiled to lower-level vector graphics formats. Language models have shown promise in learning these languages to solve simple tasks. However, it's still unclear whether they can produce scientific figures. In this work, we're focusing on the graphics language. This language is expressive and emphasizes science, which allows for the creation of complex figures with just a few commands. We want to find out if language models can understand the nuances of this language and automatically generate scientific figures based on image captions. This could improve productivity, help researchers who are not familiar with programming languages, and aid education by creating tailored examples. We're also looking at the Stack Exchange platform, where nearly 10% of the questions are about this graphics language. This makes it the most frequently discussed topic on the platform. Here's what we've done so far. 1. We've created a large-scale dataset, which we believe is the first of its kind. It contains about 120,000 paired drawings and captions. 2. We've fine-tuned a large language model, LLM, on this dataset and compared its performance to general-purpose LLMs. Both automatic and human evaluations show that the scientific figures generated by the fine-tuned model look more like figures created by humans. 3. We've developed Klima, a variant of the model that includes multimodal embeddings. This enhancement allows Klima to visually interpret input captions, which improves text-image alignment. It also allows for the use of images as supplementary inputs, which further improves performance. We've found that all models have few memorization problems and can generate new outputs. However, some models tend to generate simpler outputs than others, sometimes producing solutions that maximize text-image similarity by visibly copying the input caption into the output image. Our work is related to several fields, including scientific figure understanding, text-to-image generation, vector graphics generation, and code generation. We've reviewed the most relevant prior work in each of these fields. Despite the lack of approaches dedicated to generating scientific figures, there's a lot of research on understanding scientific figures. The task that's most similar to ours is the captioning of scientific figures. There's been some work on training a captioning model using a corpus of synthesized figure caption pairs. Other researchers have tried to improve performance by augmenting captions with OCR tokens and paragraphs referencing the figures. Some have even used reinforcement learning to consider the quality of the captions during training. There's also been a lot of progress in the field of text-to-image generation. This field has gone through 3 stages of development: generative adversarial networks, autoregressive models, and diffusion models. However, all of these approaches can only generate raster graphics. Vector graphics generation is a parallel field. Some researchers have built on innovative work in sketch generation to generate single SVG font characters made up of straight lines and Bezier curves. Others have extended this approach to include SVG icons. However, none of these models support text conditioning. Another line of research focuses on vectorizing text-to-image models. While these methods enable text conditioning, text-to-image models usually have trouble producing flat-colored SVG-style images. The vectorized results often have imprecise geometric relations and jagged paths. To address these challenges, some researchers have sequenced and tokenized the path elements of SVG icons. This allows for auto-regressive language modeling on SVG representations with text conditioning. However, this approach is limited to generating monochrome icons of limited complexity. Section Summary. Recent advancements in text-to-image generation have allowed for the creation of detailed images from natural language descriptions. However, these models primarily generate raster graphics, which are not ideal for scientific figures that require geometric precision and legible text. To address this limitation, the use of graphic languages that can be compiled into vector graphics formats is explored. The goal is to understand whether language models can automatically generate scientific figures based on image captions, which could enhance productivity, foster inclusiveness, and aid education. Section: Code Generation. Our work is closely tied to code generation, as graphics languages are a subset of programming languages. We focus on the ongoing research on pre-training or fine-tuning language models on code, often with a multitask objective that includes causal language modeling and infilling prediction. Despite recent advancements, code generation primarily focuses on high-resource programming languages like Python, Java, or JavaScript. However, commands, which are invoked as macros in a programming language considered low-resource, are often overlooked in model evaluations. We aim to address this gap in our work. We've created a large-scale dataset of drawings with corresponding captions, which, to our knowledge, is the first of its kind. Gathering this data was a significant challenge due to the scattered resources across the internet. We collected drawings and their captions from various online resources, including dedicated websites, online repositories, Stack Exchange, scientific papers, and artificial examples. Websites and online repositories that focus on collecting and sharing drawings for educational purposes were a valuable source of data. We used web scraping to retrieve drawings with associated captions from these sites. From Stack Exchange, we extracted questions tagged with relevant answers that had a minimum score of 1. We used a language model to convert textual questions into image captions. Scientific articles from open access archives were another source of data. We retrieved all papers with source files and retained those that used a specific package. We then extracted all environments using regular expressions and preserved all required preamble elements. We also parsed all macro definitions and kept the macros used for each drawing. Drawings that failed to compile after this extraction process were excluded. We also used artificial examples, instructing a language model to generate a drawing for each description. This was done using a chain of thought prompt. To improve the quality of our dataset, we augmented captions, especially those with fewer than 30 tokens, which are often considered of poor quality. We used a language model to generate short descriptions for these drawings and ranked them based on their text-image similarity. The final augmented caption was formed by concatenating the original caption with the top-ranked description. This method significantly improved the text-image similarity of captions with originally fewer than 30 tokens. In summary, our work focuses on addressing the overlooked area of low-resource programming languages in code generation. We've created a large-scale dataset of drawings with corresponding captions, collected from various online resources, and improved the quality of the dataset through caption augmentation. Section Summary. The section discusses the relationship between code generation and graphics languages, highlighting the focus on high-resource programming languages and the lack of evaluation for low-resource programming languages. It also introduces the dataset used in the study, which is the first large-scale dataset of drawings with corresponding captions, and explains the data acquisition process from various online sources. Additionally, it mentions the use of artificial examples and data augmentation techniques to improve caption quality. Section: Methods. In our research, we primarily use a base model for most of our experiments. We feed this model with captions and use code as the reference point. We chose this model because it was trained on source files that could provide useful prior knowledge for our task. We opted for the original version of the model over its newer versions because the training data for the newer versions isn't clearly defined. This ambiguity, coupled with their recent release, would make it challenging to create a test set without overlapping training and testing data. We also experimented with other models, following the same approach, but due to their proprietary nature, we could only address data leakage for one model. We developed a model we call Klima to address a potential limitation of the base model, its inability to understand visual concepts since it wasn't designed to process image data. We believe this ability could significantly improve the creation of scientific figures. To achieve this, we modified the base model by integrating it with another model that is often used to bridge vision and natural language. This allows us to extract visual information from both text and images within a shared embedding space. Our approach is similar to text-to-image models that use this duality to generate raster graphics. Our main goal is to provide the base model with a visual interpretation of the input caption, hoping that this adjustment will improve the alignment with generated drawings. This also allows us to experiment with supplying rasterized scientific figures as additional input. We integrated the two models by connecting the output of one with the input of the other using soft prompting. This required adding a feed-forward layer to connect image features with the base model's word embedding space. We pre-trained this adaptation layer on a dataset of 595K generic text image pairs for one epoch while keeping both models frozen during the process. One general issue with our language modeling approach to generation is that outputs may violate the syntactic and semantic rules of the language, potentially leading to errors and uncompilable documents. To address this, we propose an iterative resampling method, leveraging the diagnostic data produced during compilation. If an error arises during compilation, we analyze the log file to identify its source. We then reverse the generation process to just before the error line and continue sampling from there. If the error persists, we infer that the problem lies earlier in the code and reverse further back. Before fine-tuning our models, we extract a sample of 1K human-created items to serve as our test set. We conduct both automatic and human evaluations. Additional instances of generated drawings are available in the examples section. In terms of model size, we fine-tune two versions of our model, one with 7 billion parameters and another with 13 billion parameters. During inference, we also evaluate a version of our model that receives compiled human-created drawings as input instead of captions. Given the size of these models, we introduce trainable low-rank adaptation weights while keeping the base model weights frozen and in half precision. We apply this to all linear layers. We also find that training the embedding layer and language modeling heads is crucial for successful fine-tuning. We train for 12 epochs with a batch size of 128, but increase the learning rate as this leads to faster convergence. As a form of data augmentation only possible for Klima, we randomly replace the captions forwarded to the model with the reference image in 50% of the cases. Section Summary. In this section, the authors describe the methods they used for their experiments. They used a base model called Clip and modified it by combining it with another model called Llama to create a new model called Klima. They also propose an iterative resampling method to handle errors during compilation. They conducted experiments using different model sizes and trained the models for 12 epochs with specific settings. Section: Automatic Evaluation. We've used a range of automatic evaluation metrics to assess how well our models perform on our test set, looking at code, image, and caption image similarity. Here's a brief rundown of the metrics we used. 1. We used a metric that calculates the similarity between an image and text, as described in the data augmentation section. This was used to evaluate how well a rasterized drawing matches its corresponding caption. 2. We used a similar metric, but this time with human-made drawings as the reference input. This metric measures the similarity between two images, not an image and a caption. 3. The kernel inception distance metric was used to evaluate the quality of the drawings generated by our models. It does this by comparing the distribution of the generated drawings with the distribution of real images in the test set. This helps us understand how realistic the generated images look. 4. We used an n-gram-based metric to measure textual similarity. This was particularly useful for evaluating code, as it allowed us to compare human-written code with code produced by our models. 5. The extended edit distance metric was used to measure string similarity. This helped us determine the minimum number of changes needed to transform the code generated by our models into the reference code. 6. The compilation sampling rate metric measures how often we need to sample from a model to get compilable code that produces an image. This is important because some metrics depend on images. We computed these metrics for each model and presented the results in a system-level scores figure. The radar chart on the left shows small but noticeable score differences between the models, revealing some interesting trends. As expected, larger models generally performed better, outperforming smaller models on all string similarity and image-based metrics by 0.2 to 0.5 percentage points. However, all models performed similarly when it came to generating a compilable drawing, requiring approximately 1.2 samples per caption. Within model sizes, our CLIMA models outperformed their counterparts on several metrics, suggesting that integrating text inputs into the model generally had a positive effect. However, this didn't necessarily increase the similarity with a reference image. The right radar chart compares our best text-only model, CLIMA 13B, with other models. As before, all models performed similarly on most metrics, except for one model which needed noticeably more samples. As expected, having access to reference images improved performance on some metrics, but not all. Interestingly, two models performed much worse than the others on most metrics, suggesting that they generate fundamentally different code and images. Overall, our CLIMA models outperformed their counterparts on most metrics, with two models significantly underperforming. While having access to reference images unsurprisingly improved performance, our best model with only textual inputs was CLIMA 13B. Section Summary. The section discusses the use of various automatic evaluation metrics to assess the performance of different models in terms of code, image, and caption image similarity. These metrics include image-text similarity, image-image similarity, kernel inception distance, n-gram-based textual similarity, extended edit distance, and compilation sampling rate. The results show that larger models generally outperform smaller models, and integrating image inputs has a predominantly positive effect on performance. However, the correlation between image and caption image similarity is not always consistent, and some models tend to produce degenerate images that copy the input caption. Overall, CLIMA 7B and CLIMA 13B perform better than their respective models in most metrics, while CLIMA IMG improves upon CLIMA 13B in terms of image similarity. Section: Human Evaluation. We carried out a human evaluation to further assess the effectiveness of our models. This involved a process known as best-worst scaling, a comparative annotation method that yields high-quality results even with a limited number of annotations. In this method, evaluators compare groups of 4 items, identifying the best and worst item based on a given property. Scores are then calculated, ranging from -1, poor, to 1, excellent, by subtracting the number of times an item is chosen as the worst from the number of times it is chosen as the best. In our study, we focused on caption similarity and reference similarity. Evaluators assessed image groups based on text-image similarity with captions. We created groups of 4, consisting of our 2 top text-only models from automatic evaluation and human reference images. In another scenario, the human reference images were used as the standard of comparison, so we replaced them in the groups with another model, while keeping the other models the same. Each property was then evaluated by 4 unique expert evaluators with relevant research experience. To ensure a manageable workload for the evaluators, we created our groups from a subset of 100 items sampled from our test set. We assessed the consistency of the evaluators using a method called split-half reliability. This involves randomly dividing all annotations into 2 sets, calculating scores for each set, and then determining the correlation between them using a statistical measure called Spearman's rho. The results showed a moderate but adequate consensus among evaluators. As expected, humans performed best with a score near 1. One of our models was the only other model with a score above 0, followed by another model, while the last model lagged behind. This suggests that when sampling once with a given caption, our model is most likely to generate the best image. However, we noticed a slight bias towards images of text. In 75% of cases where one model was selected as the best, it copied more phrases from the caption into the image than the worst-ranked image, potentially leading to outliers and thus a slightly higher expected value than the other models. In terms of reference similarity, we recorded a similar correlation, with one model ranked marginally higher than another, indicating it correlates well with human rankings. On a similar scale, another model outperformed the rest. In contrast, The last model followed a nearly uniform distribution, with a slight downward trend for better scores. Therefore, its mode is noticeably lower than for the other models. In summary, our human evaluation aligns well with our automatic metrics, with the added benefit of lower susceptibility to typographic attacks. One of our models outperforms the others in terms of caption similarity, while another surpasses the rest in terms of reference similarity. We also analyzed the issue of language models memorizing and copying training data, a prevalent concern. We discovered that some models tend to perform typographic attacks by memorizing and copying input captions. To measure this, we determined the proportion of phrases in the model-generated code that are not found in the training data, and the proportion of phrases from the caption that were copied verbatim into the output code. In terms of code novelty, models tend to generate less novel code than humans for smaller phrases. However, for larger phrases, models become more novel, with more than 80% of all model phrases being novel. Regarding caption copying, some models copy considerably more phrases from the caption than our models. For single words, our models copy around 6.5% of phrases, while others copy more than 10%. For larger phrases, our models and humans practically stop copying, but others continue with an almost linear trend, hinting at instances where they might copy the entire caption. This reinforces our hypothesis and points towards one model as a more robust metric for assessing the visuals of text-rich images, since it seems less susceptible to typographic attacks.